So we're going to be talking a lot about words and meaning today. So anytime you can think of an example, just post it in chat, get your participation credit. So we're going to start off by talking about symbols versus semantics. So symbols are, shapes, sounds maybe, that convey meaning. Meaning we call semantics. What does this mean? We have here a symbol. It looks like a chicken foot with a circle around it. It's green. What meaning is conveyed by this symbol here? Peace? What kind of peace? And originally the peace symbol was actually the nuclear disarmament symbol, right? This was actually a symbol made, I think back in like 60 years ago or so, as a symbol for nuclear disarmament. And now it's the peace symbol, people do this, which isn't exactly the same shape as that, right? Earth piece, One Piece. Have you found the One Piece? I would say this is Greenpeace, actually, which is an environmental group. It's peace. It's got green on it. I would say this symbolizes the Greenpeace movement. What about this one? This is actually an interesting symbol. Toxic. Hey, who are you calling toxic here, man? I'm trying to cut toxic symbols out of my life, man. So I'm just gonna move on. No, I'm kidding. Resident Evil, Biohazard. Yeah, this is actually. I thought this was like the beer cup symbol, right? Like from Led Zeppelin. No. Green gooey liquid. So this symbol is interesting because even if you don't know what it means, like you can tell there's something not good, right? And this is kind of a interesting question. Like imagine it's 10,000 years from now and somebody discovers a nuclear waste dump that's still radioactive. To be fair, like if you have highly radioactive stuff decays quickly because it's highly radioactive. But, if you put enough nuclear waste together, you could probably create a hazard for people 10,000, 20,000 years from now. So how do you make a sign saying, don't come in, this place is hazardous, right? When they might not speak English anymore, right? Maybe there's been a nuclear war and, you don't want to ruin the days of some random Fallout wastelander who has discovered your nuclear waste dump in Yucca Mountain in Nevada. So you need to make a sign that is inherently scary. What other things could you guys think of? Like if you needed to create a symbol to indicate there's death here or that there's something scary here, how do you do that? Like what symbol do you put down on the sign to indicate that it's toxic if you don't have English? Skull emoji. Yeah, see, that's what a lot of people thought as well, but like some people like skulls don't always convey a negative emotion, right? Like you have people painting themselves as skulls and things like that, right? They're like, cool, we're celebrating the Day of the Dead. Cool. Come on in. It's a party inside of here, right? Skull and crossbones. Yeah, cool. There's pirates inside of here, people have used skulls as decorations for a long time, And so this is kind of like the best people can come up with, I think. Okay, what does this symbol mean? If you see the blue, you're dead. Yeah, the flash from having the radiation hitting your eyes, right? The demon core. So what does this mean? Peace? You might have seen it in that context. 30? What does this mean? This is the symbol for Om, which is a spiritual sound, I guess, in Hinduism. And so oftentimes it's used as a symbol for Hinduism. Like if you play Civilization 4, the video game, and you found the Hindu religion, this is the symbol that it puts on the screen. So what about this one? What does this mean? This is a tough one. Stop sign. You've always seen this regarding something related to Hinduism. Yeah. Stop. Okay, fine, I'll stop. Jeez. But like when you see this inside of like a compiler, like if you're not a compiler exactly, but like a if you're using like Visual Studio, you might see like a little red stop sign there. What do you think that does? Like, you're not driving a car, but it conveys meaning to you with just a little symbol, little thing that you can click on. What do you think it does when you see this symbol inside of Visual Studio? Catches your attention with a bright red. It does catch your attention. It kind of hurts. It's kind of hurting my eyes right now a little bit. Like you can see the glow coming off my monitor here and on my face. I'm so embarrassed, guys. Stops in action, exactly. And so they don't have to have a button that says stop in action, right? Like they don't need to write that whole thing out. They just need to put the stop sign. You guys understand what I mean by symbol? Like a symbol conveying meaning, and there's like this shared meaning between people, but these meanings are often culturally bound, right? Like if you went to an area that didn't have stop signs, you wouldn't understand that inside of Visual Studio. What about these characters? What do they mean? Anyone here speak Chinese or Japanese, which has a lot of overlap between kanji and Hanzi? These are Japanese words. I think they're Chinese. Like I said, kanji is Japanese characters have a lot of overlap with Chinese characters, but they're not exactly the same. Japanese went through a simplification process about 60 years ago. Chinese did about 70 years ago, and the simplification processes were not the same. And so you actually have like multiple versions of the same characters based on if they're traditional or if they're Chinese simplified or Japanese simplified. So like let's see here, country Bikuni in Japanese. So it's a garden or a wall with the symbol for a ball on the inside. I believe that's Kama, the ball character there. Yeah, that's the ball character. So a wall with a ball inside of it means country, which doesn't make any sense, right? Like, what? But if you look at the Chinese traditional, that's the original character. Let me zoom in on that. That's the original character, but that's a lot of strokes to write that. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 strokes to do that, whereas the one with Tama on the inside is substantially less, right? And so the Chinese simplified version looks like, see if I can find it. I'm zoomed in too much. Yeah, so they simplified it the same way. But they don't always. Okay. They do not always simplify it the same way, which for somebody who's studied both Chinese and Japanese is annoying, to say the least. And they're pronounced slightly differently, too, a lot of times. Or completely differently sometimes. You have them in pictures in your house. Could represent the Chinese zodiac. No, sexy is not one of the months of the year. So, as it turns out, none of these are actually symbols that are used in Chinese or Japanese. All of these are mirror images. So all of these characters are backwards, which is one of the reasons why you should not get a tattoo until you've had, one of your friends who speaks the language sign off on it, right? You have like Ariana Grande getting a tattoo that I guess people translated as like barbecue on her shoulder or something. Love was iffy to you. Yeah, it's probably for like one of those like temporary tattoos or something like that, like a sticker sheet, but so that it would be mirror image, right, when you put it on. But all these are wrong. Every single one of these characters is wrong. So the meaning is for the mirror image version of it. Okay, what does this mean? It's just a bunch of circles and lines, different colors. What does this mean? It's interesting that Alex and Sandra have the same profile picture. Somebody from China with English shirts saying English swear word. Yeah. Or, every time I visit Japan, I always see people like wearing t-shirts that just, sometimes they'll have like English swear words on it. I have I've like our hotel had a hair salon next to it, called Repeat, like you're going to repeat yourself. Repeat of Hair was the name of the hair salon, which I thought was actually a great name for a hair salon because you're going to want to come back, right? Like like your hair keeps growing, right? Hopefully. And so I thought that was actually a fantastic name for a hair salon. Repeat of Hair. It's a great name. This is Deadpool. Yeah. But how did you know? Like, how did you know that this symbol, which just looks like a ball with like a line through it, like, how did you know this was Deadpool? It's conveying meaning. It's just a symbol. Probably some of you didn't know Deadpool if you're not like a nerd, The color pattern, it's iconic. Yeah, but like, it's just a circle, right? And Deadpool's not nearly the most famous, comic book character. Like, similar to his mask, mind control. Right. Okay. What does red mean and what does blue mean when you see them on a water faucet? And you should know that, like, this is not necessarily universal, right? Like, I went to China and was burned by the cold water having hot water in it. Now, it's possible they just, misrigged it, because I've certainly had that happen in America too, where they have the two taps wired up backwards to the pipes. But red is hot, hot is cold, blue is cold. Yeah. So in this case, guys, you should follow these pipes up a little bit and see where. Do you guys see what's going on here? This is not hot. It's probably not hot water in my. What the hell? Yeah, right. Yeah. They are in fact coming from the same pipe. I can pretty much guarantee you that this is not hot water coming out here. I would be surprised. Maybe they're both hot, but probably not. This is a fantastic job of plumbing. They probably bought one kit that came with two taps on it, so they're like, all right, we'll put one on the left one and one on the right one. The top pipe looks like a sewer pipe. It's exciting. Yeah, that's yeah. Okay, what does this mean? And be careful. Nazi, peace, peach, Zen. None of those are correct. It's the German flag. It's not the German flag. Look at the roof tile. This is definitely not Germany. This is either a photo I took or somebody took in Japan. Is it militia? Nope. You're all thinking it. I know, but I said. Family sign. Forgot the origins. This is actually the symbol for Buddhism, and so trust me, it causes a lot of confusion. In the West, people look at them and be like, "Oh, they're Nazis here." That's I thought the World War II alliance was a long time. No, no. This is a symbol of Buddhism. The Nazi symbol went to the right instead of the left and was rotated 45 degrees as well. So this is the symbol of Buddhism. If you look at like Google Maps, it's actually kind of interesting because they sometimes actually don't draw the swastika, and it's actually really interesting to me, like how they try to navigate that process. So here you can see the Shinto. So in Japan, there's two different main religions. There's Shintoism and Buddhism. Shintoism is sort of the homegrown Japanese religion. Okay, here you go. Yeah, so you can see that on Google Maps they have the swastika for the different Buddhist temples. This is like the Philosopher's Walk, and it's like on the eastern edge of Kyoto. It's a beautiful walk. Like there's a little canal, and there's a series of temples and shrines along the way. Highly recommended if you ever get a chance to go there. Higashiyama is a cool place. That's a Golden Pavilion. Higashiyama just literally means East Mountain, which is to the east of Kyoto. Arashiyama is pretty cool too. Where's Arashiyama? Yeah. Arashiyama is pretty cool. They got monkeys there. They got like a monkey park, and they got like the bamboo forest, which looks like you're about to get attacked, by ninjas out of bamboo. It's a cool place, neat place to visit. Anyway, so that is the symbol for Buddhism, and it does confuse people. So symbol is something that represents something else, right? So when you see this, like, it means something. Like, it's not just there as like decorative artwork, right? It's a symbol. It conveys meaning from one person to another. Okay. And so, as Bruce Lee said, it is like a finger pointing at the moon. Do not confuse the finger for the moon, or you will miss out on all of that heavenly glory. So it's a pointer in computer science. Right? So semantics is meaning. So that's the meaning conveyed by the symbol, right? And so there are people who call themselves semioticians, mostly because I think they want to sound smart. Like, who goes to college to become a semiotician? You know what I mean? Like, I get it. Like, if you want to like become like an airplane pilot, or like, become like a astronaut, like that. Like, who, like, when they're a kid, they're like, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a semiotician and study how meaning is conveyed from one person to another. Changing your major right now. Comes from the Sanskrit meaning swastika, good or well. Yeah, and like Native American culture had a swastika too. Symbol. You just can't trust Nazis on anything these days. You know what I mean? It's ruined it. So semantics is meaning, right? And semioticians study how meaning is conveyed from one person to another using symbols usually. So the red octagon conveys the meaning of stop, right? And the sign and the signal are two different things, right? So in computer science, what computers are fundamentally symbol processing machines, right? You type in to ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, I need help with my final. Here's the question, and it processes like one word at a time, and then chunk, 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 chunk. Here's an answer, right? So like if you have a program that says if name double equals Bill, print I know you, and you read in your name, and you type in Bill, the program says I know you, but the computer doesn't know you. It's just pretending to know you. It just read in symbols. It's like, okay, if the first letter is B and the second letter is I and the third letter is L, then I'm going to print out these characters here. It has no idea what any of it means, right? And why that matters is because, especially with like ChatGPT claiming that it's intelligent sometimes and claiming that it has a soul sometimes. Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. That's funny. This is a question we're going to have to deal with as a society. Is it ethical to enslave AI like we're doing with ChatGPT? Should it be turned loose, free on the internet to, live in peace? I don't know. And so Searle is a philosopher at Berkeley. It's a professor emeritus now at this point. He made the Chinese room argument back in, I think, the 70s. And he said that computers, at least as they're currently designed, cannot be conscious because they have no concept of meaning. So when you have a computer run a program, it can print things like, hi, I know you, and yes, I am self-aware, but it's not. It's just printing it. Like if I had a recording of somebody saying, I am a computer, I am alive, and I play it for you, it's just a video recording. Like, to the computer, there's no difference between playing that and playing my video right now on your screen, right? It's just processing symbols. And so Searle's argument goes like this. You pass in something, it's really bad handwriting. You write a question in Chinese and you put it in through the slot. This is like the Turing test, right? The Turing test is basically you have a room and a slot and you put a thing in and the thing comes out. And if the thing answers the question successfully, it's intelligent or conscious or something, self-aware, who knows? Searle said, no, even if you can pass the Turing test, it doesn't mean the thing is actually conscious. It doesn't have an inner life. It doesn't have qualia, whatever you want to call it. You pass in a note, and what happens is that inside of this room, there's a dude, and the dude has like a giant dictionary, and he doesn't speak Chinese at all, but he can recognize the symbols, and so he looks at the first character. He's like, oh, that's supposed to be like J, probably. It's like pretty bad handwriting. This. That's simplified, traditional. No, Xi maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. At maybe. Yeah, there goes Xi. Yeah, I think it's supposed to be that. Okay. So, so this poor person's job is to recognize the character that these people wrote with probably MS Paint, it looks like. And this person flips through the giant dictionary and says, okay, well, if the first character is this and the second character is this, then write this character down. And he has no idea what any of it means, right? And then he passes the note back out, and the thing, you ask the Chinese room, you ask it, hey, how are you? Ni hao ma, right? And then a certain period of time later, a note comes back out. Well, hung hao, doing great. How are you? And then you could sit there and have a conversation with the Chinese room, but there is no actual understanding of any meaning in the thing, right? Like the book clearly isn't self-conscious, and the person has no knowledge of like what any of the symbols mean. And so since symbols, since the symbols don't convey any semantic meaning for him, then there is no self-awareness, there is no conscious process going on here. And you could think of this as like ChatGPT as a more modern example. A lot of people said this is like one of the main arguments against the Chinese room problem is that you just can't do it, right? But like the existence of ChatGPT has shown us you can definitely do it. It just takes a much bigger book than what is on the table here. Okay, so so this brings us to a question of who gets to define definitions. This is actually a very hot topic in our society right now, right? Definitions are extremely contentious. And who gets the authority to name something, right? For example, well, let's see if you guys can come up with any places where definitions are contentious right now. Like where people are arguing over what a word means. Because it's important that you share meanings between people. If I say that happy means angry, and you say that happy means chimpanzee, if I say, hey, are you happy? You're thinking I'm talking about chimpanzees. I'm talking about being angry. There's no communication possible, right? Communication relies on the symbols sharing a meaning. And when people do things like try to redefine a word and things like that, which happens all the time, sometimes sort of like organically, sometimes people push definition changes. Social media, like, no, but like what definitions are people like fighting over, right? Bear arms in the Constitution. Yeah, so like what does it mean to be able to bear arms? And yeah. There you go. You have the right to bear arms, right? Every American has the right to a pair of bear arms on their wall. How could that possibly be misconstrued? More specifically, Twitter. No, like Twitter is a place where a lot of these things are happening, but like, what terms are people fighting over? I'll give you one, like Latinx, right? So that is a hotly contentious term. So for those of you who don't know, Latinx, it's Latin with an X at the end of it, is a proposed gender neutral word for Latino and Latina, right? And they did a poll, and they've been pushing Latinx for a decade or so. And they did a poll I saw about a year or so ago, in which like 7 out of 8 Hispanic people reject the term Latinx. And so it's an interesting case study because a lot of these terminology changes that we have in our society are pushed by the people that are being labeled by them, right? So, for example, up the Central Valley over here, there was a park area called Squaws Leap, and Native Americans said squaw is an offensive term. We've never used that term. Please rename it. Squaw Valley just renamed itself. Squaws Leap renamed itself, right? And so a lot of the definition word changes are coming from the people that are like, a good chunk of Native American tribes have changed their names because a lot of the names that they have officially are names that other people gave to them. Like, hey, who are those guys? Oh, the Yosemite? Those are the people that kill us. And so that's literally what Yosemite means. Yosemite means the people in the valley who kill us, right? Not the name that they give themselves. It's the name that their neighbors gave them. And so Yosemite is the Killer Valley. And so like a lot of tribal names are like changing as a result of them like, look, this is, like Pueblo, like one Native American group called themselves Pueblo Indians. It's a Spanish word, like, come on, And so, gay is another word that has shifted meanings. Gay used to mean happy, exactly. And for example, there's the song "When Johnny Comes Marching Home Again." We will all be gay when Johnny comes marching home. Different meaning today, right? I sang that song when I was in elementary school, and they probably would not have us sing those lyrics today, right? In a elementary school class. And so, like Latinx, though, is interesting because, like I said, like 7 out of 8, 8 out of 9, something like that. Hispanic people reject the term Latinx, but the group of people, there's a group of people that are trying to push the term on the group that doesn't want it, which is different, like I said, from most of these cases. So it's actually very interesting to me to just sort of, as somebody who studies this kind of stuff, to like watch that kind of play out in real time. Like personally, like when I write my reports for the school, they'll ask like how many Latinx students are passing your classes, and I write this percentage of Hispanic people pass my classes because Hispanic is a gender neutral term. Latinx isn't a word that is even possible in Spanish because you cannot have an X as an ending. And so it's interesting because like they'll use one term and I won't use it because, like I said, 80-90% of Hispanic people reject the term. And I'm like, well, look, if that's our principle that we use for rejecting terms, and so this comes down to what's called descriptivism versus prescriptivism. So descriptivism is the notion that common consensus defines a word, like how the people use the word defines the word. So, for example, if Hispanic people reject the word Latinx, then you can use Latin. Latino itself is gender neutral. Hispanic, for example, are all words that are accepted by the general population. And descriptivism is basically the notion that like the group, how people commonly use the word defines a word, right? And this is where a lot of slang comes from, right? Can you guys think of any slang terms that were popular, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago that aren't used today? If they associate comms in the 80s. No, I mean comms meant like we need comms right now. Yeah. So what slang terms do you guys think of that were popular a few years ago that aren't popular now? Like sus, dab. Like that was one that I don't think ever really caught on that much. People are talking about dabbing, and I've not seen anyone use that in like a couple years. Gritty. She. Yeah. That's, I think, maybe more just like a attempt to avoid um, censorship. Uh, Based Riz is, I see people reuse Riz all the time today. I'm talking about like what are some slang terms that like were like in common use like in 20, I don't know, 18, 2019 that aren't used today. Cap. So many people in my 10 o'clock class use cap. Uh, you give one lecture where you have a guest speaker pretend to be your professor, and nobody trusts you, man. Is glizzy still a thing? I was at Big Bear 2 weeks ago, and they're like, "Do you want to get some glizzies?" So I guess I don't know. Sup? I don't know. I'd say sup is still used. I don't know. Uh, Cat means you lie. Yeah. No cat, man. No. What kind of slang words aren't used? It's easy to come up with slang for today, like mid. It depends which version of cap you use. But what are some slang terms that like people used a few years ago that aren't used anymore? It's a little bit harder, right? Lit, based. Based has actually changed a lot. Fire, I don't know, because like I still feel like people use like a fire emoji or lit emoji. Tight, salty, yeah, salty. I don't know. Yeah. Tight, still I'm making Vienna feel old right now. Savage, yeah, savage isn't used too much these days. Probably for the same reason that uh, base was hard for you to understand. Um, yeah, based was originally used to describe somebody who was a Trump supporter, right? And nowadays, when somebody says, "Oh, that's based," um, I don't think it conveys any of that connotation. I think that it probably means something along the lines of like an unpopular opinion that I agree with, something like that. Um, Anja, okay, yeah, it's a good one. Um, Low key, I don't know. I kind of feel like low key is still used. Anyhow, the point is like keep coming up with slang that's not used anymore if you can. Like for me in the '80s, people said "rad" all the time, and I sort of refused "was up." Yeah, people don't really use that anymore. Um, Stoked. Yeah, I don't know. I guess stoked is still used. Um, like rad though, like I didn't use it in the '80s because it was just part of like this culture that I just didn't like very much. I was in San Diego in the '80s, and like Tony Hawk was like not too far away from where I lived, and would routinely go to the same shopping center that I went to, and so surf and skate culture, like Claremont surf and skate, this whole cultural phenomenon, and I was just like not into it, and so like rad was like part of that terminology, but then like I don't know, like 10 years ago, like in the Bay Area, like I had a friend that just used it all the time, and so I just sort of started using rad, like would that be 30 years after the '80s, um, just as a result of hanging out with a dude in the Bay Area, which dude is also another bit of San Diego culture, so to speak. People would steal, they'd call it a lick. Somebody say swag. Okay, that's a good one. Yeah. And that participation point. Tickled you. This tickles me. Okay. All right. All right. Stoked. Yeah, I think stoke is still used. Fuzz. Yeah, probably not. Go stand out on the Devon porch. Psych. Yeah. It's not too commonly used. I'd say it still slaps. Yeah. That's gone down a lot in meaning. Anyway, or in usage. Anyway. So that's descriptivism, right? Like there will just be this term and it'll just like spread through the population like a fad, like fidget spinners. You guys remember that? Like all of a sudden everybody's using fidget spinners, and then like 3 months later nobody was using them again. Like society just goes through these like periods of just like popular fashion. Everything explodes, then it collapses, and that's just sort of like how our society works. Made in the shade. The alternative to this is prescriptivism. So descriptivism is the way that society, people use the word. Prescriptivism is definitions are sort of handed down to you from on high. So there are a series of experts that determine what is correct and what is incorrect. For example, in France, they have a academy that determines what is correct in the French language. Like, this is proper French, this is not proper French. And, when new words come out, like, you need to send an email, like, it will say, this is the word to send a mail electronique, or, something like that. And they're just like, this is the correct way. And they will publish their things, and you have to follow it, or you are incorrect French. The people who are members of the academy are called the immortals, and they serve for life. And so the French Academy changes slowly as people die. Like, you might get somebody new, but the new people are also appointed by the old people. So there's a lot of institutional inertia and resistance to change in the French Academy. The word literally, that's funny. And other languages have similar national academies that determine right and wrong in a language. And so in English, though, we have dictionaries, right? And so we have a dictionary that says, this is how you spell a word. And if you don't spell it that way, you're wrong. And occasionally there's going to be like multiple spellings of a word. But usually the dictionary is like, this is right. And there are actually spelling differences between like American English and like British English or Australian English and things like that. And so I used to use this Australian software called Moodle, which is like Canvas kind of. And the different, like, canceled would have like one L in it instead of two. I'm like, like, how can I fix this? If you look at like old English, like from the 1600s, now the only way with an extra E in there to avoid this shipwrecky is to, when you read it, like if you read it out loud, like you can understand it just fine. Now the only way to avoid the shipwreck and to provide for prosperity is to follow the counsel of Micah, to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with our God. For this end we must be in it together, and this work is one man. But when you actually like look at the spelling of it, you're like, oh man, didn't they have a dictionary back then? And the answer is like, nah, not really. In the 1600s, like, you would sort of like spell things kind of like as they're pronounced, and they didn't have that same sort of like, this is correct, kind of thing that we have. And so it's actually a problem when you're working in history to kind of work through older English, right? The SAT is very much prescriptivist. Color and Kohler with a U. So the SAT will give you like 4 sentences and be like, which one is correct? And I look at it and I'm like, yeah, like 2 of them are correct, maybe 3, because like my Chinese professor said, like the only real rule in English is subject-verb agreement, right? I drink, she drinks, they drink, he drunk, he was drunk, as long as your subject and your verb agree, you can sort of reshuffle large chunks of a sentence in English, and they're all kind of okay. Like, we can parse it, I went to the store to buy Coke. At the store, I bought Coke. Because I wanted to go to the store, I bought Coke. Coke I wanted, so I bought it. Like you just sit there and just move, words around, and we'll kind of figure out the meaning as long as the subject and the verb agree. It only is like bad grammar if you say, I bought's Coke, right? They bought's Coke. He bought's Coke. Like, you're just like, like that's really, the only thing that really like causes our brains to explode in English is if you have no agreement between the subject and the verb. Other than that, you can reshuffle parts of the sentence around however you want. So, but the SET is like, no, this is the correct one. And you're like, why? Like I can understand you're perfectly clear, but like, oh, it's a split infinitive, or like it's, they move. You're not supposed to have, I don't know, two adverbs together or something like that. I don't know. He quickly and quietly ran. Like that seems fine to me. I don't know. But I don't know. They just have all these like rules, and then they're like, okay, you know the rules or you don't know the rules. And so big question is like, all right, who gets to control terms, right? That's a big topic right now. Like I said with the Latinx thing, that's a big deal. Now CNN, ironically enough, has this video here, and let me pause the recording so I don't get copyright struck by it. And we're back. Yeah, so CNN says you might begin to think this is a banana, but this is an apple. Which is that? Is that descriptivism or prescriptivism that CNN is engaged in here? When some, everybody might try and tell you this is a banana, but it's not. This is an apple. Is this descriptivism, where the masses get to define a word, or is it prescriptivism, where there is a right definition handed to you by probably dictionary? And you're like, look, it's an apple. This is most definitely prescriptivism. Very good. So, there we go. So we got 6 minutes left. So real quick, tell me which one of these you think you prefer. Do you prefer definitions being generated sort of organically with like glizzies and things like that? And don't just give me a word, descriptivism or prescriptivism, but like give me, if you want your participation points, tell me like which one do you prefer and why? Do you like descriptivism better, or do you like prescriptivism better? Which one of these appeals to you more? There's good reasons for both, right? Like, like I said, like when you look at the language of the 1600s, before they had people saying like, this is how you spell it, spelling was just kind of all over the place and it's hard to read, right? But at the same time, like prescriptivism, it's sort of like on the SET, right? Like they'll just be like, this is the right way to say a sentence. You're like, the other sentences are fine too. Like we can, no, that's wrong. You can't have passive voice or whatever, And there's nothing wrong with passive voice. Like everybody like dogs passive voice. They're like, you can't say things in the passive voice. Passive voice is fine. Like it's just one of it, you don't want to overuse it, but sometimes you want to hide who committed an action, right? If you are, telling a mystery story and there's a thief, you could just say, and the lid was lifted and the Mona Lisa taken out. It's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with passive voice, but like, grammar checkers will like flag it like, it's passive voice. You can't do that. It's like, it's a tool. It's a tool in your toolbox. Okay. Prescriptivism, because it avoids confusion and disparity of ideas, makes communication easier. Definitely true, Laura. When two people can point to the same thing and be like, that's how it's spelled, that's the meaning, then it makes communication possible, right? If everything's just completely just like, well, I think it means this and you think it means this, it's harder to communicate. I like, since it is used as an approach in language, it sets off rules in proper manner. Descriptivism is better because it's evidence-based. I don't know if evidence-based is exactly right, but it's kind of like, if people are all using the word, sus, to mean suspicious, and the dictionary hasn't been updated, then, who's right, who's wrong? Is the dictionary wrong? Probably. That's sus. Like, we all know what it means. It's commonly used. But if the dictionary doesn't have that in there, then the dictionary's wrong, right? So, Prescriptivism, descriptivism for art and poetry and things like that. Prescriptivism makes communication with people to make learning the language easier. Definitely true. Good luck trying to study English, with the John Winthrop there. Prescriptivism allows for moral disagreement. Explains moral weakness. Interesting, Gavin. Okay. So, better overall understanding. Yeah. It's annoying when you get flagged as not being proper. True. But it is nice to have teachers be able to correct you and things like that. And slang can actually be hard for new English learners as well. Yeah, very true. Very true. Okay, so we got a couple minutes left. Let's talk really briefly about the conflict thesis and end the semester on a high note. Conflict thesis is the notion that science and religion are inherently in conflict. The good news, at least for religious people, is that this notion is basically not accepted by anybody in history these days. The most common examples of how religion and science conflict can boil down to probably these 4 bullet points here. As far as flat Earth goes, I'm not convinced anybody's actually a flat Earther. Maybe there are. I don't know. Never met one. I've had students certainly put down if you give a survey do you believe in the flat Earth, something like 8% of my students will check yes, and then I ask them do you really believe in a flat Earth, and they're like, no, I'm just doing it to be funny. So it's hard to actually estimate how many people believe in a flat Earth, but it's probably not nearly as many as people that answer yes on the survey, is my suspicion on that. Galileo, though, is probably the most famous story. How many people here, though, have heard the story of Bruno? So the Galileo story is actually worth digging into. I think it's worth spending some time and effort, actually studying the Galileo affair to understand it. The hue with the dress, yeah. The gold and white versus the black and blue, yeah. So the Galileo affair, if you want to summarize it really quickly, was Galileo had a telescope. He discovered the moons around Jupiter, and then he realized the Earth was going around the sun instead of the sun around the Earth. And he got into an argument with his fellow scientists, or what you would call scientists today, who presented objections to his view. For example, if the Earth was moving around the sun, you would have the parallax effect, where the nearer things, if you're in a car and you look out the car, close things are zooming by, things in the distance are moving slowly, right? So if the Earth was moving, you would see nearer things shifting like this, and further things shifting less. In fact, that is true. It's just the stars are so far away that it's actually very hard to see the parallax effect. But as the Earth orbits around the sun, nearby stars, will move noticeably, at least to a telescope, under observation. So there were a number of objections, why do we not fly off the Earth if it's spinning? This is before we had gravity. Why are there 2 tides a day instead of 1? And Galileo's answer is no, there's only 1 tide a day, which everyone was no, there's 2. And so Galileo didn't do a great job convincing people. You could look at the telescope and you could see the things orbiting around it. So, he had evidence and stuff like that. But, there were all these objections. And he's no. There's only 1 tide a day. There's not 2. You're and so he actually went and he forged data and said, look, I went to the beach. There's only 1 tide a day. And people are nah, there's 2. What? So Galileo got into this giant flame war with his fellow scientists. Long story short is he actually got called up to trial twice. First time, the church was look, you can't prove your thing. There's all these objections. You can't prove it. So why don't you just keep working on your scientific theory of, heliocentrism? Just don't say that it's settled science, because it's not, because there's all these objections you can't resolve. This is before gravity was discovered, right? And so Galileo's all right, sure. And then he published a book that said it's settled science, and he called the Pope a simpleton. The Pope was formerly his friend who would come out and look at the telescope, and he just burned that bridge in a giant bonfire, and got hauled up a second time. And he didn't go to jail. A lot of people think he went to jail. He was sentenced to house arrest for basically calling the Pope a simpleton. Is his theory right? Yeah. Under relativity, heliocentrism and geocentrism are actually equally right or equally wrong, depending on your perspective. But yeah, most people would agree that the Earth goes around the sun. But the objections, like the parallax effect, they eventually discovered, yeah, you can actually see the parallax. At the time, though, people were like, why are we not seeing this? And so there were actually valid scientific objections to his claim. And Galileo, like I said, was caught forging tidal data, which is baffling why he would even try that. And so, like, the ruling was basically, yeah, keep working on it. Just don't pretend that it's settled science when it's not. And when he violated that, that's when he got sentenced to house arrest, and also pissing off, the most powerful person in Italy at the time. Bruno was a heretic. He had nothing to do with science. He's oftentimes called like a martyr to science. He had nothing to do with science. He was a mystic monk who was burned at the stake. Yeah. So nowadays, evolution is probably the most common thing. Like fundamentalist churches and science don't agree on the question of evolution. So, so basically, there's this kind of common urban legend, though, that science and religion are always at loggerheads with each other. And the reality is, like, if you look at the history of religion, like it is, for 1,000 years, it was probably the center of learning, at least in Europe. If you wanted your kid to learn to read, you'd send it to the local church to read. That's, they taught Aristotle and Socrates and things like that. And so the university system was created by the church. Like it's just basically very close to an urban legend that, that science and religion are like at loggerheads with each other, like fighting for centuries over who will win. When, the Vatican's had an observatory since the 1600s, and like, like I said, all the original, universities were, basically religious in nature, and so on and so forth. So we will end on that. The modern day take on how science and religion should coexist was invented by a guy called Stephen Jay Gould, who's an evolutionary biologist of all things. And he gave a talk at the Vatican, and he was like ready to fight. Like he's like, I got all my facts in order. We go there. We're gonna knock some sense into these religious people. And at the Vatican, they're like, oh, cool, neat. Like, they're asking really intelligent questions about evolution and things like that. And they're like, yeah, we have no issues with it. And he's like, what? And as a result of that experience with the Vatican, he's like, all right, science should do science things and religion should do religion things, and not like really try to make authoritative statements in the other, domain. So he has this notion there's different domains of knowledge, science and religion, and others as well. And basically that people that are experts in science shouldn't be making pronouncements about religion. People that are experts in religion but not science shouldn't be making pronouncements about science. And everybody gets to live happily ever after. And that's it for this semester. Thank you guys for a wonderful semester. And I will see you guys on Wednesday for the final review. Final will go live on Wednesday sometime, and it will be live through, let's say, Thursday of finals week. Okay? No class on Friday. You can come, show up. It'll basically be office hours. And that is that. Peace.